Welcome to devMode.fm, a podcast dedicated to the tools, techniques, and technologies used in modern web development. I'm Andrew Welch from NY Studio 107.
I'm Patrick Harrington from Mildly Geeky in Boston.
I'm Matt Stein from Pixel Tonic in Austin.
And I'm Michael Rogg from Top Shelf Craft in Houston.
And today we have a huge list of people on here, so I'm going to zip through them. We have Fred Carlsen from Sanity.io.
Hello.
We got Lindsay DiLoretto from Double Secret Agency. How you doing, Lindsay?
Hey, how's it going?
Ransom Roberson from Venveo.
Hello.
And we've got Ben Parizek from Barrel Strength Design.
Hello, hello.
Josh Crawford from Verb.io.
Hey.
And we have Gustav Gutmanis, the lead software engineer from Solspace. How you doing, Gustav?
Hi.
Almost. And we also have Kelsey Martins from Solspace. How you doing? And we don't really know what you do at Solspace, but apparently you work there. And then we have Josh Angel, the client fluffer from Angel & Co. How you doing, Josh?
Oh, hello. That was a nice introduction.
Please tell me you have a business card that says client fluffer.
I wish I did now, but I'm sure I can arrange one.
Well, anyway, we assembled this plugin developers cabal, and there were a few people that we invited on that unfortunately couldn't make it. We couldn't get Ben Croker, and we tried Andre and Mats and a few others, but we got tons of plugin developers on
Only
here.
get 10 people, yeah.
Well, I mean, there's lots of other plugin developers out there, you know, but I wanted to get everyone together because a few years ago, I think it might have been 2017, 2018, I don't know, it was 2 or 3 years ago, we did kind of a plugin developers discussion here, and I thought it was really good, and I wanted to do it again and talk to people, kind of like a before and after kind of thing, because when we were first talking about it, the plugin store was just coming out, and no one really knew kind of where sales were going on this kind of thing, and I mean, I just want to kind of take the temperature in the room from people in terms of how has it met your expectations in terms of how plugin sales have been going for you? I mean, I guess we can start with Kelsey, I guess. Are you pleased with the way things have been going?
Yeah, very. We've noticed an increase in sales, and I don't know if that's because people are being a little more honest or if it's just that Craft has grown bigger, but we've definitely seen a significant increase in our sales right from the beginning and of course all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I've seen there was a spike in the beginning when everything started, and then it was slow growth from there. Anyone else had experiences with this in terms of, positive, negative, whatever they might be, in terms of whether plugin sales have met your expectations and whether you feel that it has been a worthy investment of your time, I guess. I mean, what do you think, Josh?
Well, I think 100%. Before, I'm even just trying to think before back to what we did. We used to have to roll our own situation where we'd have to just do Stripe on our own websites to sell our plugins, which was certainly a barrier to be able to sell your stuff. So there's no denying that it's really easy to sell your plugins and do it through the plugin store. It certainly met our expectations. I think it's great just seeing more people start putting their own plugins on the plugin store.
Yeah, and prior to this, if you wanted to sell anything, you had to kind of roll your own. And Lindsay, you were doing that through a provider that something didn't go great?
Yeah, it's no longer around.
Yeah.
Without getting too into the weeds on that one. So that was like a mixed experience. And I mean, ultimately, I was very happy to have a plugin for sale prior to the plugin store. But the plugin store definitely changed everything. I mean, to just unify the experience so everyone knows what they're getting, everyone has a predictable experience that, I think it goes a long way. And I think for the developers, one of the nice things, I don't know if this is going to come up in a few minutes or right now, but renewals. Renewals were kind of a game changer because I don't even think that was possible before. I mean, like it would have taken a monumental work. License enforcement was pretty hard to do before the plugin store. So between that, renewals, I mean, like it's been a win all the way around. I mean, we're 2.5 years into the plugin store, and there's still some work to be done in terms of like ratings and whatnot, but I think it's wholly a success.
Yeah, and I think it really took the platform to say, no, this is the way it's going to be done. These things are going to be on renewals, so I think that was pretty important. Ben Parizek, what do you think? Has the plugins ecosystem, has it met with your expectations in terms of how everything has been going?
Yeah, overall, I think it's a great asset for the craft community. And before beginning of this, I guess before the plugin store, we had kind of created a way to sell plugins on straight up craft. And that was, that's no longer necessary. So that's nice. And even from that experience, it was a lot of work to maintain your own commerce store that's kind of outside of the ecosystem. So I very much welcome the plugin store. That straight up craft store experience made me welcome paying the commission as a reduction of, separate work that we need to do around that. And I think my biggest challenge might be a little unique to our plugin ecosystem, but we were able to sell kind of a group of plugins prior to the plugin store, get SEO plugin with a form plugin and a email and reports plugin all together. And that hasn't really been an option on the plugin store. And I feel we had a good part of our sales was selling plugins as a bundle. So I think, we kind of lost the ability to kind of frame things that way. So that's one thing that still kind of comes up in my world. And I think the other thing is Composer has, its fair share of support voice still. And I think that's I still think it's a decent solution and probably the right way to go. I made a bad architectural decision in our own plugins to kind of over rely on it for certain things. And it's definitely been an ongoing thorn that I'm trying to remove from the future as much as possible, which I think is kind of embedded in the plugin store discussion.
Yeah, so you need a mouse to come along and pull the thorn out of the lion's paw, right?
Yeah.
He's the Aesop's fable parable. Yeah, so I mean, this is actually a good, we might as well just segue into complaints. Like, we're not even necessarily complaints, but things that we would like to see in the plugin store that are not there. And I'll start off with mine. I would love for anyone here that has something that they want to contribute on this, just raise your hand. I'll make sure that I get to you because there's a lot of people here, right? So if you have any complaints or features or things that you want to see done, let us know. One of the things that I would love to see is I would love the ability to be able to make my plugins free if I wanted them to be for Craft solo licenses. And there's no real great way to do that now. And the reason my logic behind this is that, well, look, if they're not paying for Craft, it's a little weird that they're paying for plugins, and I would rather them use these things than not. And that is functionality that I would love to see in there, as well as some functionality to be able to do a little bit more on the marketing side of things. What do you think, Josh? You have any comments on this or anything else that you want to do?
I think that's certainly something that I agree with, but it's not really an issue for me. My point was more going to be focused around stats. I would love to be able to see information about stuff, particularly because, this pumps into my sort of company Stripe account, and loads of things go through that. So it's quite hard to get that information back out without a lot of effort. And I did do that at some point in a very bad way, and it's helpful. And I know that there is a plugin made by one of the Bens, I think.
Yeah, I think Ben has plugin sales dashboard.
Which was brilliant, but it also struck me like it didn't need to be a plugin; it could be there in the control panel.
I agree. This totally should be something that they implement. So I'll be.
But
I don't know if it's still
come at some point.
Yeah, it's called plugin sales, and it's from Ben Croker, and I don't know if this is still the case, but I know for a very long time I was the only paid customer of this plugin. So if you really do like it and you really do want to have the stats and that kind of stuff available, buy the plugin, man.
We're using it as well. That's the best $49 we ever spent.
Yeah, I really should use it, but the only reason I haven't was I was like, I need to get a site up and running somewhere that can actually run it that isn't a client site. So I haven't.
Don't you have some kind of a local development site that just is like a junk site that you use to test plugins on?
Exactly, it's a junk site. I keep trashing it. So
you still install though, because that's what I did. I installed the plugin sales plugin locally, and so I just use it locally. And I have eternally promised Ben that when I finally launch our new site, I'm going to buy it properly. But in the meantime, I'm just running it locally and getting all my numbers. And thank you, Ben Croker. I very much appreciate this wonderful plugin you built.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic. And it sounds like...
Yeah, I did install it once before I trashed my environment, and it was awesome. But I just haven't got around to doing it again, or in fact buying it. But you could just pay him in beer.
Did none of you run websites on Craft that you could install this on? I'm just wondering, temperature of the room. Like, how many people have a Craft site in the wild that is there?
Our current website, spoiler alert, and this is about to change. This is like weeks away from changing.
Is it on WordPress?
It's a Craft 2 website.
Oh, okay.
It's a Craft 2 website that, what's the Shoemaker's Kids thing, right? So, but we're in the process. Well, I mean, within a matter of weeks, like a month tops, we'll have our Craft 3, our brand new Craft 3 website up and running. And then I'm going to buy Ben's plugin.
Well, what about from a technical point of view? Gustav, are there any things that you would really like to see in the plugin ecosystem that are not there?
Not really, no. Can't think of any.
I'll tell you something that I want. Like a long time ago, I made this pluginfactory.io thing. And, I think it works fine. There are some modernizations that I would like to see, but something I would really like to see done at some point is something similar to Laravel's Artisan Make, where you could be in any directory inside of your plugin or inside of a craft project, and you could just do something like PHP craft create : controller.
Yeah, so that's like scaffolding, right?
Yeah. And it would read the names. It would figure out where you are in the current directory, and then it would use the namespacing of that, and it would just create the thing that you needed. Because Plugin Factory is nice when you're generating the thing the first time, but as we all know, when we're developing plugins, it's usually more iterative. You'll create something and you'll be like, oh, actually, I need a console controller, or oh, actually, I need this. And it would be nice to have a CLI like that, very similar to the way the Craft has the migrate create function, which is also location aware, where it will create like that. That is something I would love. Would anyone else like to see something like that, Fred?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Wait a second. But isn't this not really a plugin store kind of thing?
Yeah, it's plugin related. We're on a plugin developers roundtable.
Plugin ecosystem. It doesn't Plugin Factory under the hood, the generator, kind of do that already?
It does, but it's a gross hack. Because it was added after the fact. Basically, it saves a .craft plugin file, I think, where it retains information about the stuff. So you can use the CLI to add it, but you have to have Yeoman installed on your local development environment, which I think almost nobody does. And it would just be much nicer as a CLI command. But I want to get Fred in here. We haven't heard from Norway yet. So what do you got to say, Fred?
Hello from Norway. It sounds like Pixel Tonic should just buy a certain plugin factory, I think. Yeah. And the solution in Laravel is much more tightly coupled with the framework and just nicer in general, and much easier to just run with it. And I mean, also like to do that with Plugin Factory, you have to remember the arguments for the CLI and yada yada.
Yeah, and that again, that kind of, so the way that all came about is when I was working on Plugin Factory. So the reason I made it in the first place was I was sick of remembering in Craft 2, if you remember, there were these horrible conventions about it had to be an underscore and this has to be camel case and whatever. If the naming wasn't right, it just wouldn't work, right?
You know how many hours I've lost to that.
Oh,
Same here.
and that's why I created it, because I'm like, this is dumb. Like, this is something that a computer should do for me. So I first created that as just a way to scaffold the stuff, just so I wouldn't have to recreate it. And I created that using this thing called EJS and Yeoman, which at the time was kind of like the thing to use to generate this stuff. And I think it's still fine for doing that. But then I realized that almost no one was going to install Yeoman locally and run this, And that's why I created the front end to it. But then after the fact on that, I added the ability to add the various controllers and stuff later. And you're right, it's clunky the way that it works. And so I would love to have something more like the way Laravel works. And I actually looked at under the hood how they're doing it. And actually the generation part of it is actually super simple. Like it's not even using a templating language. It's just outputting stuff using echo to a file, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, that is something that I would love to see improved, because in addition, another great reason to use Craft, I think, is the ability to customize it via modules. And it'd be super nice just to be able to add a controller to your module rather than having to regenerate the whole damn thing, I
think part of that sort of code generation, though, that's really missing for me is, and I'm not 100% sure if this exists in Laravel, because I sort of refuse to look at it because I think I'll like it too much, is the ability to like generate actual CRUD. Like the amount of times I sit there and I copy and paste stuff out of like the tags controller or something basic that's in the core just to get the basic idea of saving a record and getting it back out again, or saving it into the memoizable array system or whatever. And
did you know that already exists, Josh?
Yeah,
so
I know there's an arrayable it's on the arrayable trait now, isn't it?
No. There exists in the Yi ecosystem. There exists something called GII. GII. I swear to God.
Let me write this
it's a
down.
CRUD. I'm not even kidding. It's a CRUD generator. So it will generate all of this stuff for you. And actually, you spin it up and you actually get a web interface where you can answer questions in a wizard, and then it will just generate the CRUD stuff for you.
I am going to make a plugin for that.
Like, I'm not even kidding. Well, here's the thing, though. I looked into GII a while ago. Because when I was looking at refactoring Plugin Factory, I was like, well, maybe I should just leverage this GII thing to do it. And I don't know, like it didn't seem wonderful for my purpose, but it does have it's got a model generator, it's got a CRUD generator, a controller generator, a form generator. Like, it's got all of these things, and you can make your own generator too. It just seemed a little clunky, which is why I didn't end up doing it either way. Had anybody here heard of GII before?
No, but I mean, clunky is a keyword I would say apply to any of these tools in the Yi ecosystem, sadly.
Yeah.
And it does look clunky from the look of things. Yeah.
But isn't that funny, though, that we got all these people on here and people were like, I'd never even heard of this thing. The Yi seriously has a marketing problem.
But this, like, speaking of Laravel and like possibly Craft migrating to Laravel in the future, this is one of the problems, I would say, in the Yi ecosystem. Like, one of the main reasons, I would say, to move to Laravel. Like, the Yi ecosystem is so bad at marketing. They are very bad at like packaging, and I would argue also developer experience. That why should we stay really when this is all we get?
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I like Yi as a framework. I agree that it's good in many ways, but it's still clunky, right? Like, to your point about like copying and pasting as well, we all do it all the time because there isn't really anyone working on like better workflows for people like us.
Yeah, it's like Yi, or if it were a company, it would be nothing but engineers, and there's nobody focused on the developer experience or marketing or any of those other things that are important to making a technology popular and adopted and enjoyable to use,
And like enjoyable is a feature on its own, I would say. Like that's why Craft have succeeded so much in like this really crowded marketplace.
In this day and age, like, if you don't enjoy the work that you're doing, you just switch to something else that you do enjoy. At least most people that I work with, that's how they operate. So popular, like you're saying.
I was talking with Matt Stein the other day, and it was amazing. He actually had a really good point. I couldn't believe it. No, but he said something like, I feel that these days, if you don't immediately get some kind of enjoyment or interaction out of using something in 5 minutes, that people are just going to move on to the next thing. What was your actual quote?
Yeah,
that you said?
I think
something like that.
Anything that you can't play with yourself within 5 minutes is not going to stick. That was the whole thought.
Yeah, and I think that that's important, that because there are so many different things that people could choose from, having something that you can just jump in and start using. So for instance, GraphQL, I really think that graphical UI that they have there was a big part of their success, because people can just jump into that playground and start experimenting with it and doing stuff with it. I don't know. I think that is a pretty important part of it. But since we're talking to Fred, this is an interesting conundrum that maybe some people here could weigh in on for us. So Fred, I announced you as working at Sanity.io. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you are now working for what is sort of a competitor to Craft. They're in the same sphere, but kind of probably not really. But you have the conundrum of, okay, so you are kind of moving out of the Craft ecosystem. And I think you have the record for the most Craft plugins from any individual developer. I'm pretty sure that's a record that will remain unbroken.
And then we're not talking about, my local development environment.
We don't even want to see that. No. But what do you do? So, and I would love to hear anyone's input who thinks about this. So if you were in the situation where you're hired from another company where realistically you're just not going to be able to maintain some of these plugins, what do you do? What's next? So what are you thinking, Fred?
Yeah, so on my end, it's a great question. Like, what do you do? And I don't really. It's a hard question to answer, and it's not straightforward, would think. Especially having invested so much in the the craft ecosystem, and I care a lot. So I think I will never, leave it fully. But obviously, I'm shifting my focus on something else that will require a lot of, effort and care during the coming years. Yeah, so I think, I have a lot of free plugins, and to a certain degree, I would maybe look at like getting rid of some of the lesser used ones, the ones that aren't obviously useful for a lot of people.
But what does that mean? What does it mean to get rid of something that's open source?
I mean, exactly. So you can't
Make it open source.
I don't even think you can delete anything from the plugin store. Am I right?
Yeah. I think you can. I think you can request them to remove something.
Yeah. But there's no delete button. So
I don't think so, no.
Kind of telling. No, so I think maybe I would archive them and that will, Craft will not show it in the update screen if it's not compatible with future versions. So at some point that will probably break. Possibly when it moves to Laravel. There's no one around to rewrite it again.
Fred, I was going to say, according to Brandon's plans for Craft 4 and moving forward, is that, or even just based on Composer itself, if you don't update your plugins for the latest to be compatible with the latest version of Craft, they won't show up in the plugin store. At some point, they will just stop showing up.
Exactly. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. So at some point that will hide itself, but there's still like a chance of people being confused, like Googling for something and finding it and then seeing, oh, this is for Craft, and then they will be confused when it's not showing up or it's not working, or that's a problem to figure out. That being said, I have been chatting to some people about possibly handing over the responsibility, selling all of them as like a package so someone else that I trust can care for it.
Is that someone giving you money or you giving them money? I'm not even joking.
Yeah, so that someone would give me money.
Okay,
I would,
all right.
Like there's I have some commercial plugins, and there's also like that.
I'm saying, I don't mean that as an insult, Fred. I mean that it's kind of like someone handing you a baby, where you're just like, wow, that's really precious, but wow, that's also a lot of work. Yeah,
exactly.
As part of that, do you just like end it there and say, enjoy this bag of 1,000 plugins, or do you have like a support period where you can be available to explain things and transition, or how do you handle that part? Is it just a clean break, or do you have a handoff period?
I don't know. I haven't gotten that far. Like even just valuation of something like that is hard. What's it worth to me? What's it worth to anyone taking over it? And those like maintenance. How do you handle that? A ton of questions. I'm all ears. Anyone?
Yeah, let me give you my opinion. So what I would probably do is I would do 3 things, and I may be missing out on some stuff. But first, I would do what you're talking about in terms of making the GitHub repos, just making them archived, so they're read-only repos. And then obviously I would also add deprecated to the title of the repo so that it's there. It's very obvious that you're using something that is deprecated. And then the other thing, in addition to whatever private channels you're using to look for people to take these things over, you can also add to your composer.json, you can add a script that will then output something whenever someone installs this stuff that will say something like, this package is looking for a new owner. And that's another way that you could potentially do it, because someone at some agency might depend on one of these plugins and they're installing it via the CLI. They might see this notice that says this is looking for a new owner, and who knows, they might very well take it over. Does anyone else have an additional thing that they might do in this case?
Well, what about talking to Michael? Because he's done it already.
All right, Michael?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Look, I think
you in it.
I think my experience was probably unique.
For people who don't know, tell us what you did.
So I took over some plugins from Squarebit once upon a time.
Would you do it again?
And
knowing what you know now, would you do it again?
I would, but I would do it differently. I massively underestimated the amount of support backlog that was changing hands.
Any of us could have told you that just from being on the outside, but
that's like inheriting a group of like an angry mob outside your house, right?
It kind of was, and not to disparage the plugins, which were great and well loved, The transaction was very fair, but I massively underestimated the amount of cost that I was gonna have to invest just to get support under control. And in my case, by the time I had done that, I was burnt out and broke on those, that pocket of my life, and it kind of stagnated after that. And I regret that very much. And I think I would do it again, but I would do it with a very different preparation. And I think it's hard to value a software business. You can look at some amount of sales, the last 6 months of sales, the last year of sales, the last 3 years of sales, but like none of the traditional frameworks for valuing a business really work, especially for something like a plugin, because plugins themselves are so fast moving, the market is so fast moving, and the underlying product, Craft's API, is so integral to the future of any plugin that it's just really hard to pin down how much value is actually changing hands when one developer gives/sells a plugin to another. So I absolutely would do it. I mean, the reason I did it was to support the customers, because the plugins were widely used and well loved. And I think Fred's heart is in the right place too. He's built this incredible portfolio of useful things, and there's some aspect of investment that needs to come back for the time that he's put in, right? And there's some aspect of pride deserving to kind of have your identity attached to these things that you've created. And then on the flip side, there's like, this is just anybody taking on this portfolio and trying to support all of it into the future is just going to be spread thin. It'll be a real challenge. But it's
okay. So Michael, Fred is a breeder. He's created effectively all of these little plugins are his babies.
They're
right?
rabbits, man. They're rabbits.
I don't want to accuse Fred of doing anything weird or illicit, so I'm not going to go there. But what advice would you have, Michael, for Fred specifically? Like, okay, so probably he should bucket his plugins into different categories of things that he thinks are worth continuing on. Probably most of the paid ones would be in that bucket. And then things he wants to get rid of completely. And then things that are in the middle where if someone picked them up, he could do something with them, like start bucketing them, I think would be a good start. But what other specific advice, Michael, would you have for Fred? And Fred, if you have any questions for Michael, because he's done it, like what would you tell him to do?
I mean, I think be realistic is the only advice that I feel qualified to give anybody. And what I mean by that is realistic in what you need to do to really support customers who are depending on your stuff and what the future looks like for them with you moving on to greener pastures, but also realistic about, do certain plugins need to have a life beyond their current state, and how has the market shifted, and how is Craft as a product shifting, and what little niche things did you make in a pinch that there probably would not be a lot of point to building an audience in Craft for that particular thing, right? Like being realistic goes both ways, and you just have to give it a good think.
Okay, but let's get him some specific advice. So the plugins that he thinks he wants to get rid of, what does he do to get rid of them? Does he just take them out back and shoot him in the head? I mean, what are we talking about here? What exactly does that mean?
You put a deprecation note on the repo and on the package, and you say this package is abandoned and it is not going to be supported in Craft 4, and thanks for your support, live long and prosper. But you just can't be romantic about it in either direction.
And I think you need the deprecation notice in Composer too, right? When you're installing it. And we've all seen that where there are notices coming up that saying these packages are seeking funding. Well, you can also put notices up saying this package is deprecated, don't use this thing anymore.
I mean, in the Craft 2 to 3 transition, we also saw that CraftNet was kind of helping with that, right? The list of Craft 3 ready plugins that showed up in the Craft 2 update screen, and you could pull request against CraftNet and put little notes on your plugins like, this plugin is in development, this plugin is not being developed for Craft 3, this plugin is being replaced by such and such, this plugin is no longer needed because Craft incorporated the code, like whatever it is, like you could give kind of helpful notes to your users, and now in Composer you can do the same thing.
How you do it doesn't really matter as much as the fact that you communicate somehow to your customers what your intent is and give them the chance to deal with the situation however they will.
I think how you do it matters. I think you have to be more explicit than you might think you need to be. And the reason is, like, so I, at some point, deprecated all of my Craft 2 plugins. And at first, I was very mild in the phrasing. And I was getting tons of people, like, still filing support issues, still confusing one repo with the other and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean, Matt?
Yeah, I do. But I'm not saying how doesn't matter. I'm not saying that's irrelevant. I'm just saying the thing that matters most is that you clearly communicate. Whatever method you choose, clearly communicate your intent. And what you're describing is a lack of clarity, not so much the method that you chose to.
I think the part that confused me is where you said it doesn't matter how you do it. I think is
I'm going in circles. I'm saying the medium that you choose doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter which
as much
channel.
I know. I'm just giving him grief. I understand.
Somebody else go.
How many people have you turned down to update the Craft 2 version for them?
Are you talking to me, Ransom?
Yeah.
I have had some people write to me, but I'm not going to say that any of the plugins are necessarily bug free, but there haven't been really that many people that have written in and said, hey, this thing doesn't work. I guess part of the reason is just I was very clear eventually in labeling all of these things as deprecated, and they are all open source. So if someone really wants to, they can just fork it and fix it, And Ransom, I was actually going to come to you next because you're working at an agency and you may or may not be using a number of Fred's plugins. I want to call him Carl just for historical reasons. Yeah, you're using a bunch of Carl's plugins. How would you feel about that if he puts deprecation notices on everything? Where would you want to go with it? And would your agency ever adopt one of these things maybe?
So yeah, we've had certain scenarios like this before. And as the lead, I've tried to push us away from using a lot of plugins that kind of meet this criteria that in my head where like I don't ever want to use plugins that are really reliant on their content structures because it really scares me. Or plugins that I want to use on every site. Like a good example is like a redirect plugin. That's something that I know I'm going to need it forever, and I'm always going to want it to work the way I want it to work. So we just have our own. I don't have to worry about it. But there are some, and generally, if they're important enough, I would just fork it and have our own internal version. Because we have no interest in owning plugins, really. I mean, it's just not worth the time. Most of our clients don't even really know what a plugin is.
Right.
So it would be a huge pivot to go and start doing something with plugins.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is from your perspective, it probably would be better and safer to just fork the repo, make whatever fix you needed, and just keep it on the down low like that.
Yeah,
because then you get the fix, but you don't have to support this thing and have other people deal with it.
I don't want to like step on the plugin developers' toes. There are redirect plugins out there by some people, and I don't want to compete with that. It's not my interest. Right. It's not in our interest as a company generally.
Well, so. and all of this discussion actually, especially the discussion about what is going to happen with supporting these plugins from Fred, brings me back to an opinion that I've had about software, especially this kind of software, for a very long time, which is that although we are sort of in the product business, I think we're more in the support business. So from my perspective, I think there are a lot of people that buy my plugins because they know if something doesn't work, I'm going to be there to help them try and fix it. And I don't know about anyone else, but I would say a good 80-90% of the support that I do don't end up being bugs in my plugins. They're like usage things. There are things that people are not understanding about how to do something with them, or just plain they don't know how responsive images work or something like that. So I find that a lot of what I do ends up being support. Does anyone else have that same mentality here in terms of you're really in the support business, Kelsey?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, that's the one great thing about having renewals too, is that it allows us to, offset our support costs in the long term. And but yeah, I mean, it's very few support requests or bugs. Vast majority of them are implementation issues. And my God, some of these things are like rat's nests of that they're trying to do all kinds of ridiculous stuff. And it's neat because sometimes it helps us, I guess, steer our development. When we see people doing certain kinds of things, we realize, okay, let's see if we can make that actually a feature, let's say in free form or whatever. But yeah, and that's, I think, one of the other things is, our pricing of our products, we've priced it a little bit higher maybe than a lot of others do. But with that, we don't let any support fall through the cracks. We're on top of that. And I think anyone using our support is typically pleased with it. But yeah, I mean, support is definitely anytime we build something, it's always the number one idea. The number one consideration is always how much support is this going to add? This is a complicated feature. Should we build it? Is there a way to make it intuitive so that we don't have to be spending hours every day trying to teach people? And obviously we're happy to do that, but I mean, the more intuitive a product can be, or the less confusing features it can have, the better it'll be for us for support. But yeah, definitely support is very, very important to consider when in any of these scenarios, when you're building software, adding new features, taking over a product, handing off a product.
And how do you handle that, Kelsey, in terms of when you have someone they've purchased Freeform or Calendar or whatever, and you're getting what it starts off looking like a support ticket, but very clearly you realize they just need help setting up their form, and how do I get into Twig? And do you say, okay, yeah, we can help you with that, but it's it's at our consulting rate, or is there a certain amount of help that you'll give it? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so I think we've tried to tackle it, I think, in multiple ways. We've built more and more guides as we hear more and more people asking the same kind of stuff. So we're not trying to teach the same thing over and over again. We can just send a link to a guide. We also, our support is, we can't help someone build their whole website. Somewhere in there is a line where it's like, this is a little too much. But yeah, it's a matter of how do you go about that. What we do is we have a premium support feature where people can basically, if they need something that kind of goes beyond our typical support request, or they're getting a little too in depth with it, they can subscribe to a paid support option where we will do whatever it takes. We will, once they're paying for the support individually, we'll hop on a call with them. We'll spend 4 hours with them, whatever it is, and walk them through it. And interestingly enough, a lot of people have been very, very receptive to it. We weren't sure if people would be grumbling about it or what, but a lot of people, they just find themselves in a pinch where they need something dealt with. And when they can get direct access to the developer and figure out things really quickly, it ends up being more worth their while to do that.
Yeah, because let's be honest, that's the reason why most people are using plugins or using a CMS or using any of these kind of platform things to begin with, is that they are in some kind of a crunch. So they do need a certain amount of the stuff done for them. So it totally makes sense if it would be part of the support budget if it's just easier for them to produce the thing. We would gladly pay for it.
One other thing I was going to add to that was that when you were asking about plugin store requests, ideas I had hoped that we could do some sort of support model, whether it's through misusing the additions feature or whatever. And I know that that's currently not possible. I know that I've talked to Brandon Kelly, and he's specifically mentioned that he doesn't at this time want to handle that. And it makes sense. I get it. It's more of a edge case, I guess, probably in what people are asking right now. But yeah, we would love to be able to have someone be able to go right through their plugin store and purchase some sort of premium support or a higher up edition that allows them to get a block of support time or whatever.
Yeah. So Patrick, for what it's worth, the way that I approach this stuff is I just try to help everybody, right? So if someone has a question, even if it probably doesn't end up having anything to do with the plugin, which a lot of them are that way, I still try to help them with it, in terms of giving them something. Obviously, if it translates into a ridiculous amount of time, then at some point you have to say, okay, look, this is not really a problem with the plugin. Here are some resources you might want to read, that kind of thing. I try to look at it from the aggregate point of view that this person that I'm helping with on this particular project, they may have bought this plugin a number of times for a number of other projects, and it's only this one that they need this kind of additional help with or support with, even if it doesn't have anything to do with the plugin itself. So I think from a value proposition, the way that I come at it is that I think people are, when they're buying a plugin, they're also buying it, they're kind of buying me in a way. And I want them to be confident in doing that, because we've all been there. Like everyone here has been a web developer, and they've been there when they're trying to build a website and they go to an NPM package and they look at it and it says last updated 4 years ago. And then it just says chill just runs down your spine and you're like, holy crap, should I actually use this thing? And I just think that is a big part of what factors into it. I mean, Josh Crawford, do you have any opinions on this? Because I see you always being really active in working with customers on questions and that type of thing.
Yeah, I think it's really similar to what you sort of just said, is that you sort of have to look at the bigger picture sometimes. There's obviously a line you've got to draw with, if somebody starts to say, oh, how do I output entries on a craft site? It's like, well, it's not part of strictly what, the navigation plugin, for instance, does. So there's definitely a line, but yeah, I think as much as you can to your ability and your time and the effort you need to put into it to just help people. And I mean, it's probably a little bit easier for you, Andrew, because you do that anyway through stalking every Discord question that everyone seems to ask you. And
stalking, really? Stalking?
Yeah. You just all stalking. You do is you just sit there.
You make it seem like I'm parked out of their house at midnight or something.
That's it. That's just how helpful you are.
Okay. Usually stalking and helpful doesn't go together, though. I'm just saying.
That's it. But no, that's it. It really is the support business and just trying to be as helpful as you can, I suppose.
Going back to the plugin store and just hearing you talk about knowing who your customers are as someone who's bought, dozens of my plugins. Is there any desire there to have a better handle on, not just how many installs I have or how much revenue is coming in, but who are my customers, or getting information into that so you could then plug it into a CRM, and when someone does come to you for support, you're like, oh, this person's been a great customer, and help with tracking that? Is there any interest in that? I
was also going to just chime in with that is that support at the moment, it's like for me and Verb, it's very lax, where somebody submits a GitHub issue, I'll help them, or if they send us an email directly, I'll give them a hand. But I'm actually not checking if they've purchased a license or if their renewals aren't. It's really just an honor system. And I suppose that's open to abuse and whatever. And that sort of also ties into, technically, people can run plugins without purchasing them on craft sites. And I don't really know about it. But really, I think all of us are just sort of taking a leaf out of Pixel Tonic's book with craft itself, that, there really is that level of trust with everyone out there. But it'd be really neat to see, I think Kelsey mentioned it, as some sort of level of support or some way to facilitate support through the plugin store, which ties into licenses and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I do the same thing. I don't even check, right? Because at some point, first of all, I just don't feel like the work it takes to actually go look it up. I just don't feel like doing that, because it's not always clear. Because sometimes the license will be coming from the developer, sometimes the client will buy it, and there's not really a clear, easy way to then look it up. But even if there was, at some point, like, this could be a potential customer. You know what I mean? Like, they would be perfectly willing to buy it, and you don't want to interrogate them and do that kind of thing. What do you think, Josh, Angel?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in an interesting position, because I seem to get quite a lot of support requests for one plugin. And for me, the struggle is weighing up the amount of support it requires versus the amount of money it generates. Mm-hmm. Because I'm massively strapped for time for a whole host of reasons, and there's months that go by I really regret selling plugins because I feel like I can't do those customers, which they are, justice. I can't field all of their requests. I can't hire someone to deal with it because it doesn't earn enough money to do that, and I can't work on features as fast as the customer base would like. So it's not like the demand isn't there. The customers that I have that are like, can you do this? Can you do that? But for me, the real difficulty comes down to sort of like viability and revenue. And I feel with my one sort of viable plugin that I've allowed myself to release is that there's a sort of funny gap that I've not personally quite got out of, where it's not hugely viable to field all the support requests that are there. You have to sort of make a loss on that. Yeah. But as a result of doing that, you lose any potential development time of building the plugin up to get more revenue, to make it more viable. So I'm interested, and the reason I raised my hand really in what other people's experiences are of that gap, and when they sort of went over it. For full clarity, I I make precisely £500 a month from my plugin Spoon, and that is a day's worth of time.
Right.
And I do typically spend a day a month on it, and frequently end up spending more than that. And a lot of that time, as you're saying, well over half that time is spent dealing with support tickets.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so now I want to know more about the active installs number on the plugins craft store.
Right.
You have 3,000 installs. You haven't made $200,000?
I know. I don't look at that number anymore because it annoys me. It annoys me intensely. I just look at what comes into Stripe.
Like Josh, to your point, I think that being a plugin developer for profit is very much playing a long game. And when I say long game, I mean years and years. All the investment that you've put into Spoon and your other plugins to this point maybe you're at like a break-even point in terms of hours you've spent on development and support versus the amount of money you made. And that might be true for now, but over time, over the course of several years, it's going to shift more and more in your favor, especially as renewals are a big part of this, right? So more and more sales as the craft community grows, and then
we need to talk about renewals.
You basically are planting seeds, and then you have to watch them grow for years and years and years. And if you have the patience to do that, it can be really rewarding. But most plugins probably take years to kind of break even.
Yeah, I love you, Lindsay, because you're just extremely encouraging always, and you've often encouraged me in the past. But I think, Spoon itself is a bit of a unique situation because I built it when I was at an agency, and that was years ago, many years ago, 5 or something years ago. And so in one sense, it was not a standing start. I had to port it to Craft 3, and then I started getting money from it. But I think I'm hesitant. I've got at least 3 plugins that I would love to release, and I'm hesitant to do the investment in making them release worthy in the sense of clear documentation and making support time available, purely because I just feel a bit scared that it's going to explode and all the support tickets are going to come in and it's not going to pay itself off. So I think that's what I'm sort of looking at, is going, well, how much of a leap is it? Do you have to have so many days a month runway of time available to keep reinvesting in it until it starts to come back? And I guess I feel a little bit like this is generally a business question, but this seems to be like a weird business market. It doesn't behave like other markets. And I think I keep just keep sit still a bit longer, keep watching, keep seeing what happens. Because,
well, Josh, I would look at this from the point of view that, something that is generating £500 a month, maybe $800 something like that. That's hobbyist territory. You know what I mean? In terms of, like you said, that's like a day. And I would look at either ways that could be subsidized. If you had clients that needed custom work to be done on it, they needed a particular thing, then they could pay you to work on that. Or I would try to look at features that I could add to it that could potentially boost the sales of it. But at least from my perspective, that is kind of a sticky position to be in, because you do have people that are paying for it. So you do have an obligation to these people. But then again, you're also not making that much money from it.
Correct. And in some cases, I've been really honest with people, through private channels in particular, and said, look, I'm really sorry. I would love to help you further or implement your feature, but I genuinely don't make enough money off it. Would you like a refund?
Right.
And I'll be honest, no one's actually taken me up on that, because obviously they therefore get enough out of it that it's worth $59 or whatever it is. And I think, to come on to one of your other points, I genuinely think, for me, again, it's an interesting case because it's one plugin and it does one very specific thing that one day will get baked into Craft, and I can.
Well, everything will eventually probably get baked into Craft.
Well, I've talked to Brandon about it before, and occasionally he sort of said, in this particular version maybe, but the other plugins I've got, one of the things I've done with it, which I feel like is a change for me, is I've built a few plugins now over time that have been requested by clients, and I've built them for building the plugin, at the same time telling them I want to retain the intellectual property on this, and I'm going to resell it possibly at a future date. And then
that's what I always do too. Yep.
Yeah, and that's actually been going really well. I guess I'm looking at the next stage of that and going, well, I've got a couple of plugins now that have matured. They've sat on sites for a while. They've run well. well, is it worth dumping them in the plugin store? And I guess that's my next question for myself, really, more than anything.
I mean, I think it would have to be something that is broadly desirable enough that it's going to be worth it to you. And I know that that's a tough thing to determine, but I would almost err on the side of not releasing stuff publicly unless you were fairly certain that it was something that could do relatively well, because, as we're hearing from everyone here, the kind of burden of having created this thing, and especially having asked for money for this thing, you really have to keep that in mind, and there are definitely plugins that I've done where retrospectively I'm like, you know what, I should just make this free. Unfortunately, even if you make it free, or even if you give people a refund, that still isn't really satisfying to them, right? Because they still have a project they're working on, and they still were using this thing, and it's still not working. I mean, I think it does absolve you a little bit from it, but I'd be interested to get Ben Parizek in here, because you've been kind of hibernating here, and I want to hear your thoughts on all of this, Ben.
Well, I think you all are wise, and I also agree with the err on the side of don't do too much. I think it's code. It comes with code debt, and every independent decision you make over time seems reasonable. But then unless you're really going all in on these plugins, like Josh described, it's not really a business model in and of itself. It's, I think others have said here as well, Ransom was saying, don't over recommend even using plugins on sites. And as much as I'm proud of our plugins and what we're trying to do with them, I often tell clients, like, we want to avoid these things as much as possible, across the board. Everybody's plugins, like, these are all people I like in the community, but just don't trust plugins. They don't run like Pixel and Tonic. Pixel and Tonic is a team of software developers, and most plugins are agencies and hobbyists who have only so much time. There's a few plugin developers out there that have Soul Space here and Josh's company. I'm not pulling it up, Josh, but I don't even know how many plugin developers you have on your team aside from you. So I think even the people with teams, it's one or two people at most that is really behind the code. And, with the risk of Craft changing the framework on you and breaking changes on minor releases, there's a lot of code debt that comes with releasing anything here, and your trust in whoever is making their $500 a month to care enough to update to the next thing.
Right. And I think that raises a lot of issues in terms of, I just think that in general, it's better to focus on one or two things and try to do them really, really well, rather than trying to have a whole number of things and try to just keep everything juggling in the air, And it's something that I've seen over the years in lots of different spheres of software, where people will come out with a product, it'll do well, and they'll be like, I'm a genius, I'm going to go make a whole bunch more products, and they don't get the same success out of it. And what you really need to do is you need to focus on what's working, eliminate all the distractions, and double down on the stuff that is doing really well.
Which I agree. I'm going to say that I share Josh Angel's conundrum, basically, where you want to do well by your plugins, and you want them to grow, but at the same time you don't have you're not earning enough, and in combination with other obligations, clients, your life, etc., it's just so hard, and you get caught between those two. And that's been my main lessons from these 5 years with the upgrade from Craft 2 to Craft 3, right? It's one of the main lessons. And to your point, knowing what I know now, if I could go back, I would have done what you did, just focused on one thing at a time and made it really well and put in the effort, and especially documentation and whatever.
I think all this stuff matters. And I think that, so I as a plugin developer, I make enough income from the plugin store, I could do nothing else if that's what I wanted to do. And I assume that Solspace, obviously they do a whole lot more. They're a bigger company, and Verb is a bigger company, but I think they are getting a decent bit of revenue from their plugins. I don't know, right? Because I don't have access to any of this stuff, but I'm just assuming that they're doing pretty well. So I think that it's a combination of finding the right thing and then focusing on that thing rather than getting distracted with a whole bunch of other stuff. you know?
Critical part of that being learning to identify distractions, because it's fun to have ideas, and it's like Josh was just saying, like having plugins, but being able to tell what was a really good idea from something that may be a distraction. I think the whole thing is being able to discern what matters, and you're only going to get there from experience and these kinds of conversations and specifically learning from them. I think that's the hard part, at least for me.
So I guess my point in that is I think the ecosystem is there. And I do think that it is nice. And I think that livings can be earned, but I think you have to do the work of identifying a niche, of doing a really good job at that, and then also proving that you're going to be there to support this thing and to help people out with it. Because I think that matters more than anything else. Like when I look at plugins to buy for sites that I'm working on, I care a whole lot about the history of the person who is maintaining this thing. Like that makes a big difference to me. But this actually spins it off into something kind of related, that I have looked at some of these other ecosystems. Like I've looked at Gatsby. I thought Gatsby was pretty cool. I thought Sanity.io that Fred is working at, I think that looks really cool. But there's no third-party ecosystem that I can discern in any of these things. What do you think about that, Fred? I mean, you're working there now. Like, I just feel like a lot of these, especially the JavaScript-oriented things, there doesn't seem to be any monetizing of any kind of an ecosystem to go alongside of it.
Well, it's hard to say, but just speaking for Sanity and my perspective, it certainly is like my experience from the Craft ecosystem. That's something I'm bringing to the table at Sanity. It's one of the things I'm excited to see what we can do. But then in Sanity, there's like a key focus on the community. So it totally makes sense to improve on that. There already is like plugins, like a plugins listings thing on the website, but there's so much more. Yeah, exactly. But there's so much more we can do there. So
well, I had that talk with Newt a long time ago about Sanity, and we had some offline talks about it too. And I was just like, look, man, I would love to get involved with Sanity because I think you're doing some really cool stuff, but there's nowhere for me to make money in this ecosystem. Like it just doesn't exist other than A, working for you, or B, just using your product to build client sites. Like there's no third-party ecosystem. And I have mentioned this before, but it wasn't until Apple opened up the iPhone and brought plugin developers in and created that whole ecosystem around it that the iPhone really exploded. You know, so I'm kind of frustrated at some of these technologies that I think are really awesome, but no way they're not really offering that kind of place for an ecosystem to flourish. Whereas WordPress, for all the crap we give it, they've got an amazing plugin ecosystem. Craft has got a plugin ecosystem. Satamic has a plugin ecosystem. You know, it just seems crazy to me that some of these other services don't have that.
Yeah, but I mean, like, again, speaking just from Sanity's point of view, I do think it's flourishing well on its own, even if there isn't plugins. There's like a ton of developers that really love it and are able to do really nice things and in an effective way, even if they have to write more code on their own. So it's hard to say. But anyway, like I'm all for doing more there. And
I'm not saying the plugins ecosystem doesn't exist. Like I know it, like it's really cool, the stuff you can do, but that either has to be funded out of you just wanting to do it just because you want to do it, or a client paying you to do it. There's no way you can create a product or a service that goes along with it. And I would love to see that. I would love to see that kind of flourish around some of these things. And I think that, you know, you are in a really good position there to talk to them and be like, look, this is a way we can raise all boats here, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's one of the things, you know, that excites me. And, you know, I just started, so it's early days.
Well, we expect you to ship the store tomorrow, Fred.
Exactly. So, I will ship it tomorrow. No.
But Ben Parizek, you wanted to jump in here? You had something you wanted to react to what I was just saying?
I think the pointing out the network effect of something like the plugin store is important here. And I think even the way Craft started, it kind of started out of another CMS community with a network of developers that were already largely fans of Pixel and Tonic's plugins. So, you know, if it was just a CMS company to start from scratch, they would have had to build that community and that ecosystem. And I think they benefit a lot, kind of basically introducing a product to an existing community and realizing the flaws in that the way that other community wasn't developing. And then over time, sometimes slower than we'd like, kind of getting these network relevant things in the hands of the first party. And something like the plugin store in the hands of the first party is just essential. There's just no way to do that as a third party option and have the trust of the community, especially the larger businesses who decide to work with the platform. And you see them doing that now with the professional network and potentially cloud offerings or something, but really kind of asking that question of what should be first party and what helps us build what should be first party to be the center of that network that people are rallying around to support the product.
Yeah, one thing, I mean, and I think it's funny, Josh, you saying I have plugins that I think I could put out there, but I'm afraid, like, what if they take off? That's so frustrating that, you're afraid of being successful because I think we've seen it before in Expression.
He's afraid of the support, not the success.
Exactly. No, exactly.
Yeah,
well, that's what I'm
definitely the support.
Right. You're afraid, and we've seen it with Expression Engine where people either weren't getting paid for licenses, and I'd love to know more about. I've talked before that I feel like Pixel Tonic needs to police people who are running plugins without a license a bit more. Right now, it's very easy to look past the nag bar.
I agree, man. I had someone, I know you got more to say on this, but I had someone write me. I think he was a CTO from a company, and he wrote to me and he said, hey, the developer of our website said that the plugin will operate whether we buy a license or not. Is that correct?
I remember, I think you aired this one on Discord and said, like, how do I respond?
Yeah. So this kind of thing is a thing. And I am like the old goat of all this stuff, because I was doing this kind of thing back when it was just called shareware. Mm-hmm. And there was a huge jump in sales when we moved from a model of just pay us if you want to, and it'll remove the nag notice, to this product is crippled or doesn't work fully until you buy the license code. Like it doesn't reflect well on human nature, maybe, but there was a big jump in sales when we did it. So go ahead, continue with your point.
Yeah. I mean, you look at, you go on a shopping website and you get a big modal that takes over the entire window. There's nothing more annoying. Can you imagine if every time you logged into the back end, maybe on your first session, it put up a big giant, you are running 3, unpaid for plugins, or however, I guess it's something where if you pay for a year, but then you don't want support after, maybe you don't want to penalize people at that point. But there are plenty of people that have a plugin running that's never had a license. The license never has been paid for.
And to your point, Patrick, there's a website that you and I and someone else we know that are all friends have worked on, and there's still the plugins there haven't been paid for.
Yep. The other part too is that it's difficult, I think, to on the plugin store. I mean, even to pay for Craft. I was about to complain that you can't buy Craft on the plugin store. You can. It's just buried way down at the bottom and hard to find. CraftCMS.com doesn't even link to it, so it just says upgrade an app. You go to Statamic, you have a nice link right on the page. It says here you go, $259, and you're on your way to paying for Statamic. With Craft, if you're on the Craft site, it just says upgrade an app. They could link over to whatever it is. There's a link on the plugin store where you could pay and get your license key. And I've come across this one on a couple of recent builds. We've gotten a lot better at disallowing admin changes and using project config and all that. And once you've set up Craft the right way, now it says, hey, you should pay for Craft, but you can only do it in an environment where you can make changes. And now I've got to explain to them, okay, and actually, I didn't even know about this magic buy Craft link that's not on their website. Craft Commerce doesn't have a link to buy Commerce. I'd love to see Pixel Tonic, look at, you're running an e-commerce business in some ways. Yep. How do we optimize for making it easy for people to buy Craft, to buy Commerce?
I second that.
Yeah, to buy plugins. When you go to the plugin page, there is no buy button on that first above the fold section. You have to scroll all the way down, but if you go too far down, now you're at the change logs, and now you got to go up a little bit. There should be a buy button when you first hit that page. So if all these wonderful plugin developers we have are linking off to the plugin store, the next page has a very easy place for people to click buy.
Yeah, and this is a problem
that try buy should be up in the header.
Yeah. Yep. And let me one more point. And then when you click on that, it says, okay, do you want to buy it for a single year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? There is no set it and forget it. Hey, I want this plugin, keep me renewed. You have to then go into, I think, id.craftcms and find your plugin, go into another page, and let it set it for auto renew. Yeah, maybe it's because they're such nice people, but Pixel and Tonic couldn't run a gym membership, because you need to be able to give people easy ways to say, I want to give you money. I don't want this thing to expire. Just let it renew for me. Right now, it's really difficult to do that.
It would be like subscribing to a magazine.
I mean, you saw every month. You saw with the SEO-matic issue a few years back, you had a massive amount of people finally renew for the first time once they need those support updates. I bet a large percentage of those people, if that was the default option, like, basically set me up for subscription, I'll pay, $99 now, and then whatever it is, $49 a year from now, they would have just left that checked so that it's one less thing they have to worry about. But instead, they had to go and log into id.craft CMS and figure all that out when they have a problem.
I think part of this is Pixel and Tonic is to quote unquote blame or whatever, because I agree with you. If I'm buying something that is subscription based and we agree that best practices are that you keep things updated, don't make it hard for the thing to auto renew. Like, it should be the default that it just renews, and they can turn it off at point of purchase if they want to. But by default, it should be, I think it should be billing for renewals, and not because I'm greedy and because I want all the money, but because it's something that should be done. These plugins should be updated. It's something, and part of the blame there, I think, may fall on the developers that make the site, that they don't have a maintenance contract, and as part of that, build in all of these plugin updates. But I'm with you. Like, a lot of times you want it to be built to the client and you want to just set it up and you want it to just auto renew, and by default it should just happen. And a lot of times you'll have a non-technical person or someone who doesn't know Craft as well that is the one that is actually purchasing it, and they're not going to know to what they should be doing here. It should by default should be doing the best practices thing. And I don't know, I kind of feel the same way about the project config issue that you mentioned about buying plugins, because if you adopt best practices and use project config and disallow admin changes, the plugin store becomes kind of unusable.
Yep. Yeah, it's only usable in my little Docker instance, and I can't give a client access to that. Yeah.
Which is crazy, because a lot of times you do have clients that you really want them to be the ones buying it. You really want the billing to be going to them, and there's no way for them to own that. So I agree with you. Like, that
I think
should be fixed.
There's a big aspect that is just training your customers, whether it's your end user client customers or your site developer customers. The Craft community, and I'm not talking about anybody here or even really Pixel and Tonic, but the broader community of developers is still breaking old habits, old bad habits from like the expression engine days and kind of some of the marketplace toxicity that arose years ago. And we're still breaking those habits in terms of like training people to do the right thing.
But they should be doing the right thing by default is the problem.
I agree with you that I think there's a lot of opportunities, and I know that a lot of these are on PT's list, but I think there's a lot of opportunities to remove friction from the process of buying Craft, buying plugins, renewing. I personally would love to see in the way that a really well done magic login link can remove friction in a lot of app experiences. I would love for there to divorce an individual license from the whole rigmarole of Craft ID, of logins, of whatever. I would love if I could just hit a license link, a license specific link, plug in my credit card, that license is paid for. And if I need to do anything with it later, then I can, log in through my Craft install, I can log in through my Craft ID or whatever. Don't make me log in to give you money. I should be able to send a license specific link, whether that's Craft or a plugin, to my client and say, pay for this.
Yes.
And it'll show up later in the right place and it'll do all the right things, but you don't have to worry about that right now. You just have to follow this link and pay for it.
Or even you can say, okay, pay for this. They're going to email you a license key, forward me that, and I'll take care of the rest.
No, it should be even more automated than that. I agree with Michael. Like, one of the things we learned many, many years ago is you want to make it as easy as possible for people to pay, right? And you also just, if you're running a business, we're not talking about being greedy, but you don't want to leave money on the table. And I think Pixel and Tonic could be making more money if they were a little bit more forward about these renewals, both for Craft and for plugins. And that would be a good thing, because if they're making more money, they would no longer be this smaller team that wouldn't be able to not get to a lot of the issues that we want them to get to, whether it's plugin store or not. And also, if there were auto renewals on these things, and if it were easier to buy stuff, and if the licenses were enforced more, I mean, who knows? Maybe Josh Angel would be making enough money that it would actually be worth his while to spend the time working on this plugin.
Yeah,
and
I think
then everyone benefits.
And for Josh, I mean, I think one thing too is that getting good at just not feeling like everyone who's ever given you $59 for Spoon is now owed hours of support. Like, take it as an opportunity and, look at the support request, say, okay, is this a bug? Does this look like there's something that's breaking with, a stock Craft install, or there's a PHP error, there's a JavaScript error, they're giving me an honest to goodness bug? Or are they saying, hey, I'm having trouble using this? And if it's the latter, say, have a form email that says, hey, we can see you're having some problems integrating. We're happy to help you set it up. We have this price for a half day of support. And hopefully then soon you're going from spreading over only $500 a month and spending a lot of time on support to $500 a month, and I'm billing 20 hours a week from people who need help. Or maybe it's just 10 hours a week, but something that ends up the actual license fees are then a feeder into people seeing you as someone they can call upon for consulting work.
Well, my main point would be that making money is not evil, right? Because what it actually does is it enables you to do a whole lot of things. So as a, for instance, when we had this talk several years ago, there were a number of people that were like, you know what? I would love to be a full-time plugin developer. I would love for that to be the case. but the revenue stream just isn't there. And I'm not saying that these things alone would necessarily change that, because there needs to be the market share there as well. But I think if licenses were enforced, like if I wasn't getting emails from people that said, hey, the developer told me I didn't really need to buy this thing, is that true? There should be some way to enforce this in a stronger manner, such that you really do need to buy these licenses in order for your site to operate. Now, I don't think that it should go down, but at the very least, maybe it shouldn't be able to go live, until they're bought or something. I don't know what the solution is, but there should be stronger license enforcement. I think that it should be renewal by default for these things, and it should be super, super simple for clients to buy these licenses, even on production, or even if it's not through the site directly, if it's just, some kind of a link that they can be given, maybe one magic link that they just click that has everything added to their cart that they need to buy. I think these three things would bring in more revenue. It'd be more revenue for Pixel and Tonic. It would be more revenue for plugin developers. And who knows, like a lot of the people here, maybe they would be able to devote more time to working on these plugins, because a lot of people here, I think, really want to. Right, Lindsay?
Yeah, let me just jump in real quick, because I love all these ideas. I love the magic link idea. I think that the licensing and all this stuff, like all these ideas of squeezing more money out of the existing system, they're all fantastic ideas. But let me just also say this. What Josh is talking about in terms of his income from plugin sales, in contrast to what Andrew was talking about, his income from plugin sales they're very different, and Josh's is a lot closer to what most people are dealing with. I think that
probably well over 90% of the plugin developers will be in my camp.
99%.
99.9.
There's a very small percentage of plugin developers who are capable of making a living off of plugins alone, and Josh's story is the baseline. That is the normal story.
But I don't think it has to be. And I guess what I'm saying is obviously the market share needs to be there. But I don't think of it as squeezing money out of the ecosystem. I think of it as not leaving money on the table, which, anyone will tell you in business, if the money is on the table, like, don't just leave it there, take it. I don't think it's magically going to transform someone who's making $500 a month to someone who's making $3,000 a month to where they can justifiably devote a lot more time to it. But I bet you if Josh's plugin sales doubled, he probably would devote more time.
Totally. I just briefly on all of this, like, I'm not naive in that I think I could probably squeeze more money out of Spoon as a plugin. There's features I could put on it, and it would bring more people in. I could be better at support and documentation, and I know that would bring more people in. But I guess my point is really my reluctance to do that is the risk. The risk of doing that and sinking what could be weeks or months of time into doing that versus what might come back, because the proven cases of what I would class as successful plugin developers in terms of they can make enough money to either make a living or make a part-time living out of it, like Andrew, there's not many of them at all. We've got most of them here, and I think that for me is the big thing. I've got at least 2 plugins in my back drawer that would do well. And I say that confidently, having used them on existing sites or heard people talk about the need for that thing or seen what agencies regularly buy, having worked in agencies, and I know they do well. And I think there's still just something in my gut that makes me fear getting into that, because
if big picture wise, it's going to be a wash over the course of a year. It means you're going to be in the red up front.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if you're taking your current ROI and then just doubling or tripling it, and it hurts even more than if you hadn't released it.
Right.
Exactly. And I think that for me, it feels like there's still an awkward leap unless you happen upon something incredibly popular that's popular quite suddenly. There's an awkward leap between where me and the common people sit.
I think it mirrors entrepreneurship in general in that way. Yeah. I mean, and again, going back to just what I've learned is you just can't be romantic about it. Talking about whether you could make a living being a plugin developer, I think 1 in 1,000 ideas might be able to support a living as a plugin developer, but you haven't even then got to, would I even want to? Would I want my life to look like that? That is my, that's my job now, is I am.
Well, true, because it's a decision about whether or not you're building and selling a product as opposed to, I guess, what most people are doing.
And I think people get excited about the idea of passive income, and I'm going to retire to the beach, and my plugin's just going to sell itself. And
this is what we assume Andrew's doing all the time.
Oh yeah, I'm at the beach, right?
He's just on Discord on the beach.
Yeah, he's gonna I think so.
Please.
I think
he's going to spend 6 hours editing this podcast. So
yeah. But you have to be really realistic, and to your point, even if you have a plugin that could do well, I mean, I think everybody on this call probably has half a dozen in our pockets that are either half built or a quarter built, or we've deployed them on our own sites and haven't dared to release them publicly, or whatever it is. It's not just, could I make money off of this? If I look at my life in 12 months or 24 months, even if this thing was successful, even if it was making money, would I want to add this to the list of things that I am beholden to? And most of the time, the answer for me is not anymore. Like, I've been there, done that. It bit me in the ass, and I messed it up royally and came back from it. And like, I'm so much more cautious now about what I put on the list of things that I'm beholden to. And I have taken a lot of recent inspiration actually from the Laravel scene, and especially from folks like Frake. I forget what company is, Spotsy, that what do they have, like 3,000 Laravel packages or something, and they're all open source, and 2 of them are commercial, and the rest of them are just out there. And the README says, we built this because we use it. If you can use it, that's great. If you want to add a new feature, we're probably not interested, because we're only interested in supporting stuff that we use. And they're super unromantic about it, super upfront about it, and they've been remarkably successful with that mentality. And I take a lot of inspiration from that.
I think on that's actually something that Andrew talked to me about quite a while ago, which is that actually, if you've got something, and I should listen to this, if you've got something that, you want the community to like engage with, then just release it for free. Yep. But again, I still I'm an extremely cautious person. I still sort of go, but then there's going to be support, and I'm going to feel bad if I don't support those people. But I guess one of the things that I'm sort of taking away from this is that there's an element of developing a thicker skin around all of that as well, and going, well, look, it's free. And having a stock response, like you sort of said, Patrick, can help that become easier.
Communicating that, releasing it, and saying this comes with 0 support. Here's what I mean by 0 support. Enjoy it, but here are all the different ways to respond to your situation. So just know that before you play with it.
And there will be lots of people that will read that on a README and go, well, I don't want to use this plugin. It's not supported. And that's great.
And that's great. Yeah, exactly.
There are also lots of people that will not read the README, just so you know. That's something I run into more than not, is that a lot of, we all see this when we do support, is that people just aren't reading it. So, you can put that notice out there. They may or may not read it, but I still think, Josh, it's better to release this kind of thing. Like, release early, release often, iterate on things if you want. But yeah, like Matt said, make it clear, that this is what it is, and, that's the way it goes. I don't know. There's a statistic. We were talking about all of this in terms of plugin sales and the marketplace and making money there and everything. And there were some statistics that Brandon released in terms of sales that made it pretty clear that as a aggregate or as a whole, there is a healthy plugin ecosystem for Craft. I don't remember off the top of my head of what those figures were. If I find them after the fact, I'll link to them. But there was a healthy chunk of money that was being distributed to plugin developers, and then also Pixel Tonic is making their 20% cut. My main mantra is just do some of the low-hanging fruit like Patrick was talking about to make that ecosystem grow. And I'm not talking about squeezing the money out of it. I'm talking about not leaving money on the table, Make it easy for people to pay for stuff. Like that should be a no-brainer. Make these licenses renew by default. That would be fantastic. Some kind of license enforcement in some form or another, so people aren't just installing these things and not paying for them, because it's happening. Like it's definitely happening.
On the flip side, one of the good things about being a plugin developer, even if most of my plugins are hidden in the Craft system, is that 9 times out of 10, you come across something and it needs to work slightly different in Craft, and you ask Brandon, and then he just does it.
Yeah.
Like, if it's not going to break anything, or it's not out of, if it's a reasonable request, he just does it there and then. Like I had that very experience the other week, and he was just like, oh yeah, that's fine, it'll be in the next release. Like he didn't even answer me before he'd written and committed the code.
And that tells you that you should have confidence, and because
well, I
this
do.
thing
This is the thing.
supported.
I have confidence in Craft.
But that's what you want if you want to be a successful seller of plugins, you hopefully want to have people to have the same confidence in you that you have in Brandon. Now I realize that Brandon is freak of nature, like he's just amazing at what he does, but still, you know what I mean? Like if you have that kind of confidence in them, you're more likely to buy their stuff. But Matt, you're gonna say something about my rant here?
Yeah, I'm putting on the plugin developer hat. Just going to clarify that first. I think you kind of hit on it for me, which is that a smooth way of interaction with the store is part of the Craft experience, and it's part of the experience that we as plugin developers don't have control over. Ideally, a client has money and is paying you to provide a service to make their lives easier. And the only time you should have to discuss the plugin store with the client is when their billing information needs to change and they need to update a credit card or something. It should be as smooth as possible, because that is what you are providing them as a service, and that's what Craft offers. And so the experience with the store and how you use that with a client should reflect that as well. And I think there are lots of little points of friction that are out of sync with. And
I think it's not optimal now, but it's gotten way worse with the best practice of using project config and allow admin changes being off. Like it's gone from being not great to being actually problematic.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm gonna have to schedule a screen share, and we're just gonna have to. It's tough. I keep on forgetting, Matt Stein, that you work for Pixel Tonic and that you work for the man now.
Good time to point that out, Patrick. Thank you.
Well, look, we could sit here and beat the dead horse of frustrations with the plugin store all day. We've certainly given Brandon, who I'm sure is listening, enough of an earful. But we're coming up on an hour and a half.
I want to get Gustav's in here though. He's been patiently waiting.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I want to say that maybe this problem with disallowing the admin changes and people not being able to purchase licenses in production could be solved by pre-generating license keys for plugins, so that when it goes to production, you could have this magic link, which I think Michael mentioned.
Yep.
And Craft should phone home and check if the license is now purchased or not. So that would not require people to actually purchase a license, get it, and then put it inside of Craft. You'd have it already.
And that's the smartest thing that's been said this whole time. Pixel Tonic, I would say hire this guy, but Kelsey might get really angry.
Yeah, stay far away from him. He's no good. He's
just ping me, guys.
Wait, this is I'm going to show my ignorance here. Does Craft not already generate a license key for plugins when you install them?
No.
Only for core.
You have to
Because it does
and
Craft.
then store them in Craft. I guess you could even use the UID of the plugin entry in the database.
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of techniques that from a technical point of view they could use to implement this. But really, the important thing is that they see it as a priority and as something that actually needs to be fixed. Because I think it does, especially if the more modern workflow that we're recommending to everybody is to use project config and disallow admin changes. Like it is a problematic point of view, at least from from my perspective. But I think that about wraps it up for another episode of the devMode.fm podcast. Make sure to subscribe. And if you enjoy the show, please write a review on iTunes, tell a friend, or retweet this episode. We really do appreciate it. We'd also love to continue the conversation. Leave us a comment on devMode.fm or find us on Twitter at devModeFM. And definitely send tweets to @mildlygeeky to tell him to fix this extra to make it shorter. For the devMode.fm podcast, I'm Andrew Welch.
I'm Patrick Harrington.
I'm Matt Stein.
I'm Michael Rogg.
And I am just going to say thank you to everybody. So thank you, Fred, Lindsay, Ransom, Ben, Josh, Gustavs, Kelsey, and Josh Angle for coming on. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you, guys.
I know we went way longer than normal, but I kind of wanted to. We had so many people. I wanted to do the best.
I was going to try to steer us back to a happy note for just a minute before we cut it off.
Hallelujah.
Happiness is underrated.
In the end, I had to leave my office to get dinner. I was cooking dinner right before the show, and I didn't make it. I didn't. I wasn't able
hilarious.
to eat it. Yeah.
I mean, I assumed someone might take potty breaks, but dinner breaks. I didn't know that was happening, but that's hilarious. All right.
I had to in the end.